They play with it for a while, and then the teacher says to the principal, this is too expensive because, the children are doing just about as well as they used to do. And I thought to myself, is this true? If I could take this piece of technology and took it to the worst possible school in the remotest possible area, would the results have been any different? And this experiment really talks about that. So we are talking about self-organizing systems in education. You can see the most important part of each slide. Less important pieces at the bottom. In this case, it's my name. Let me tell you what I did. I started in 1999 with an experiment. In 1999, I used to work in New Delhi, in India, and I used to work for NIIT, which is a very large training and development and software development. It's marvelous. So I was telling you where I worked. Now imagine the situation to yourself. This was southeast of Delhi, in an area called Kalkaji, and in Kalkaji you have this. So we had NIIT, which is a very sophisticated computer training organization with a boundary wall surrounding it, and just outside of the boundary wall there's a large sprawling slum. This is fairly common in many of the developing country large cities, that the slums and the industries sort of coexist with each other. So every morning when I would walk in, I would see on each side of the wall two different worlds really. On the one side you have these bright, young, well-dressed software engineers sort of rushing about. On the left side you would see a whole lot of children playing with a ball and a stick which they are pretending is a hockey stick or something like that. And I thought to myself, I wondered what the two sides thought of each other, so I asked. When I asked the people on the right, my colleagues, what they thought of the other side, I got an unusual answer. They said, we wish they didn't exist. Now, not in a bad sense. What they meant was that we wish there was a world where that other side did not need to exist. When I went to the other side of the wall and asked the children what they thought of my side, the children gave also an interesting answer. They had no opinion. Now, this took me by surprise. They had no opinion in the sense, I thought that they might say, we would like to be like them. But what they would do instead is that they would poke their head over the wall with the same expression on their faces as children have when they go to the zoo. And they had several questions to ask, which were all interesting questions. Question one, why is everybody dressed the same way? Question two, why does everybody speak on telephone all the time? Question three, why does everybody argue about parking? So I realized a few things about my side of the world. But anyhow, what I did was, I decided to see if the two worlds could meet. And I made a rectangular opening in the wall. Are you getting a shadow of my head? No, you're not. Okay. You get a rectangular opening in the wall. I put a glass pane against that. I took a PC running fairly broadband internet, put it against the glass pane, and buried a touchpad into the wall. So now from the slum side of the wall, you have this dirty stretch of wall with this blue rectangular PCs sort of facing you with the touchpad, and in those days it was running altavista.com. Opposite that, a few yards away, there was a tree, And on that tree, I bought a small Sony camcorder, and I strapped it to the tree, put it on and left it there. This is what happened. That was my office at NIT. After about 8 hours, we saw this. That's the hole in the wall. So you can see why it's called hole in the wall. That little boy you see on your right is the son of a tobacco seller who sits outside on the pavement. To his left is a student, a girl of 6, and she's a short little thing. What they were doing was quite interesting. He was teaching her to browse. Now this was not supposed to happen. So it raised more questions than it answered. Is this real? Does the language matter? Will the computer last, or will they break it and steal it? And of course the most important thing, did anyone teach them? And my colleagues said, there is something wrong with your experiment. What must have happened is that those children must have just climbed a little bit over the wall, called one of the young engineers, and somebody came across and taught them. I wanted to check that. So I took the experiment out and repeated it. This time in the middle of India, in a little town called Shivpuri. And I was told by reliable sources that in Shivpuri, nobody had taught anybody anything for a long time. so that was a good knowledge. So in Shivpuri, I buried my computer in one of these building walls. And this time I was in a car on the other side of the road with another video camera with a big zoom on it. So I could zoom in and see what was going to happen. That's Shivpuri. You know, I edited it to put the cow in because when you talk about India, you have to show a cow. A warm day, 2:30 in the afternoon. The first child who came there turned out to be a 13-year-old school dropout. He came there and he started to fiddle with the touchpad. And very quickly noticed that his finger movements on the touchpad was moving something on the screen. Now this got his attention because, as he told me later, he had never seen a TV where you could do something. So he started doing that. While he was doing it, he made an accidental hit on the touchpad. That's a click, and the Internet Explorer changed page. You'll see him do that in 6 minutes. And then he looked from his hand to the screen, literally, as you'll see just now. Then went close to the computer, and 8 minutes later, he was browsing. Meaning, he knew when the cursor changes to a hand, you have to click, and you can go forward, and you can go back. Like any other child, he then called all the neighborhood children. By the end of the day, 70 children were browsing. So, I made a hypothesis that children in groups, can self-instruct themselves to use a computer and the internet. And when I made this hypothesis, my colleagues raised another objection. They said the hypothesis may be very interesting, but you have a problem that your entire instruction is in English, and that's not fair to the children, because they're faced with not only an unknown machine, but in an unknown language. I wanted to see if that was true, so I repeated the experiment again. This time in rural India, in a village called Madantusi in the north. Madantusi had a school, but it had never had an English teacher, so the children had absolutely no English. I buried a computer in the wall of that school. So it's 30th of June 2000. Madantusi is basically a sheep farming, or animal farming kind of area. First thing I noticed was that there were more girls than boys in the village. In the slums, there are more boys than girls. The women of the community sat at a distance and watched, but never came near. The men showed no interest whatsoever. I went back after 3 months. Since since you won't understand the language, I'll tell you what happened. When I went back after 3 months, I found a young boy and a girl playing a game on the computer, some sort of a Microsoft game. As soon as they saw me, this boy turned to me and said, "We want a faster processor and a better mouse." So, you know, I was a bit taken aback. So I said, "How do you know all this?" And they gave me a very simple answer. They said, "You've given us a machine which works only in English. So we have to teach ourselves English in order to use it." And when I measured, they were using 400 English words with each other. I asked this boy to show me something that he could explain in English. He showed me an anatomy lesson that he had got off the internet and showed me the picture of a human hand, the skeleton of a human hand. He asked me in Hindi, "Do you know how many bones there are in the hand?" And I said, "No, I don't know." So he said, "There are 32 bones. And do you know what they're called?" he said. I said, "No, I don't know that either." And then he switched to English. I will try to duplicate his accent because that will explain a lot to you. He said, "The bones of the hand." So I made another hypothesis that language need not be a barrier. That children might be able to actually teach themselves a language if they want to. And you hear this word many times as we go along with children. So please remember those words. With children, the most important word in education is if they want to. At this stage, I was beginning to get some attention. I was publishing the results and I got some funding from the World Bank. And that funding allowed me to see whether statistically what I had seen in those 3 experiments would actually work elsewhere or not. It took me 5 years to do those measurements. It will take you about 4 minutes to see them. We started at the top of northern India and the Himalayas. India is a good place to do this experiment because we have all the ethnic diversity in the world, all the genetic diversity, all the ethnic diversity. We also have all the geographic diversity of the world. So the place you're looking at, in winters the temperature goes to minus 60 degrees. So I could test my engineering. Will the PC last? Then to the foothills of the Himalayas, which is humid, deciduous, but cold. You can hear them dealing with the American accent. Then to the western deserts, very hot with fine sand, which is a terrible technological challenge when it comes onto the keyboards and the CPUs. By this time we were beginning to get the engineering right, and that engineering you will not see outside here. This is near the Pakistan border, a very disturbed area. This is still children with a website which teaches them the English alphabet, and they're trying to pick the alphabet up from there. Then to central India, these are hot, humid fishing villages, corrosive ocean air. I'll have to stop this here because I don't have all that much time, but we covered the whole of India, right down to the tip of the peninsula and then to the east. we get? We got, well, I need to show you one more thing that's very important. Last year I moved to Newcastle, and I'll tell you why I did that. And I did one experiment from Newcastle, amongst several others which I don't have the time to show. But this last experiment is an experiment which I did in a village called Kalikuppam. Kalikuppam is a tsunami-hit village in southern India. I had an hypothesis by this time, which I wanted to prove. The hypothesis was that this kind of learning must stop somewhere. There must be something that children will not be able to teach themselves. I went to Kalikuppam to test this. This was the hypothesis. Can Tamil-speaking children learn biotechnology in English on their own? And I hope you realize that you can't have it any worse than that. There was no possibility of them getting in Kuppam information from anywhere other than that one hole-in-the-wall computer. So it was a very clean social experiment. It was, this is the background. It was hit by the tsunami. The school was destroyed. A hole-in-the-wall was constructed in 2006. The parents are mostly illiterate. I downloaded material on biotechnology from the internet in English, put it there. I explained to the children, I put something in there which is hard, but it's a very important subject. Take a look at it and see if you can understand anything. I went back 2 months later. When I went back, I called my experimental group into a room. I said, did you look at the material? They said, yes, we looked at it every day. And so I said, and they said what I had expected. They said, we've understood nothing. They said, it's very hard. The gesture they was making was, it's a very hard subject. You know, the sign of the DNA. It was a very hard subject, and it's all in English, so we couldn't understand anything. So I said, then why did you look at it for 2 months every day? What were you doing there? So a 12-year-old girl raised her hand, and I said, yes, and she said, well, apart from the fact that defective replication of DNA causes genetic disease, we've understood nothing. Sorry, no more movies for you. So, but what she did was she showed me a piece of a lesson on neurons and how neural connections get disturbed by something called prions, which I don't know what they are. And she said that there is a disease which she couldn't pronounce because it was Alzheimer's. She said it's because of this kind of prions attacking neural connections that old people forget. She's 12. I have only 1 or 2 minutes left, but I discovered something very important about education which you must know. Because I was absolutely curious to know how did this happen. This was not supposed to happen. Nowhere in education theory does it say that this can happen. I'll tell you how it happened. When I left, on the first day, when I left the computer, this one girl and 2 or 3 other boys were standing in front of the computer and opened some page. The girl said, I think I know what it is. The boys said, you are a fool. You know nothing about this subject, so don't try to pretend that you do. The girl went home and stole some money from her mother, stole it. She made a long-distance call to Bombay, to an uncle of hers who's just a government clerk. And she said to the uncle, before my money runs out, can you just tell me one thing very quickly? What is the meaning of the word DNA? The uncle didn't quite know, but explained as far as he could. He said, you know, it's what it passes on from the mothers to the daughters, and that's why we look like each other, blah, blah, whatever. That's all it took. She came back that same evening. She started to teach herself biotechnology. She did all of this, became the school's main teacher of biotechnology. All of this for only one reason, so that those 2 boys will not call her a fool again. So, if that's all it takes to do universal primary education, it's not a question of money. It's a question of triggering the right emotions. The pre-test score was nearly 0, the post-test score was 30%. I got to 30% in biotechnology, in English, Tamil-speaking children in the middle of nowhere. It can be done. The question is now what? And I'm going to end with what I'm doing in Newcastle. What are the conclusions? Groups of children can learn to use computers on their own. A good statement, that last line is what I really like. I think that was great. Irrespective of who or where they are, it has nothing to do with affluence. Computers and internet must be provided to them in a safe public area that they can, that's a playground. And it should not be put inside a school. If it's put inside a school, these effects don't happen because the children expect timetables and examinations. An impossible number, between 200 and 300 children become computer literate in 6 months, or in 3 months, with one computer. If you calculate the time, it works out to seconds per child, but I know how it happens. The children, one child operates, and about 15 children stand around him, looking and giving him wrong advice. If you test the 16, all 16 score approximately the same amount. It costs 3 US cents per child per day to do all of this. It produces computer literacy, improves math and English, changes social values, improves attendance, reduces dropout, reduces petty crime because they don't have any time to do any crime. and there is a whole technology of using little fans and that sort of thing which keeps the humidity and the dust out and keeps the computers running. This is the question I'm going to answer, try to answer in Newcastle. It's a question that only someone who is a few years away from retirement can ask, because I might just make a huge fool of myself. The question is, can groups of children complete their schooling on their own? If we can't help them, we haven't been able to help them for 2000 years, can we at least help them to help themselves? And that's all I have.